I remember when the cracks began to show, though I didn't recognize them for what they were at the time. Anne and I had been married for nearly 24 years, a lifetime shared between triumphs and tribulations. I thought our bond was steadfast, formed through the laughter of family vacations and the quiet togetherness of mundane evenings. She was my confidante, my partner, the mother of our son, Ethan. Ethan, now 22 and studying at the university, was our greatest accomplishment. He carried the best of both of us, and sharp wit and my relentless work ethic. When he came home for visits, the house came alive again. It was during these visits that Ethan often brought his best friend, Marcus, along. I admired their camaraderie. Marcus was polite, eager, and almost like another son. The visits were a balm to my soul. Lately, Anne and I had grown distant. I'd chalked it up to the usual wear and tear of long-term marriage. She seemed preoccupied, sometimes even indifferent, but I attributed it to midlife restlessness, perhaps even boredom. I'd planned to suggest a getaway, just the two of us, to rekindle the connection that felt dimmed but not extinguished. I was still naive then, still hopeful. Looking back, there were moments that felt out of place. A lingering glance from and toward Marcus, a laugh that seemed too intimate, or her sudden bursts of energy whenever he was around. But my trust in her was unwavering, and my mind didn't dare wander into dangerous territory. I dismissed the oddities as a projection of my own insecurities, choosing instead to focus on our life's bigger picture. Ethan, too, seemed to bask in the visits. Having his best friend under our roof brought out a side of him that I hadn't seen much since he left for college, a carefree joy, a boyish playfulness. He'd light up the room with their banter while and cooked dinner, or they'd retreat to the basement to play video games, their laughter echoing through the house. But there was another sound, subtler, lurking beneath those moments of levity, a sound I wouldn't recognize until it was too late. It was the faint hum of betrayal building in the quiet corners of my home. Life fell into its predictable rhythm whenever Ethan came home. Anne would brighten as she bustled around the house, preparing his favorite meals and making everything perfect for our son and his best friend, Marcus. I admired how much effort she put into these weekends, how she embraced hosting Ethan's closest friend as if he were one of our own. She loved being a mother, and I saw her tenderness in every detail, folding fresh linens for Marcus's room, setting the table with care, and even teasing him about his appetite. It was comforting, this small piece of normalcy. Work had been stressful for me lately, and I found these weekends rejuvenating. I could sit back and watch the two young men banter over video games or argue about sports with the passion only 20-somethings could muster. And would smile indulgently from the couch, sipping wine, occasionally joining in on the jokes. Her laughter filled the room, a sound I cherished, though I didn't realize how rare it had become. Marcus was a good kid, polite, funny, and full of charm. I liked him, honestly. He had an ease about him, the kind of energy that drew people in, and Ethan clearly adored him like a brother. I enjoyed having him around, seeing my son so at ease and happy in our home. If anything, I was glad Marcus spent so much time here. He brought out the best in Ethan, who sometimes seemed too serious for his age. Looking back, I see how cleverly the cracks were concealed beneath the surface. And never gave me a reason to doubt her, not once. If anything, I saw her as the glue that held us together during those times. She played the role of doting mother and gracious hostess perfectly, her warmth drawing everyone closer. It never occurred to me to question her motives or her feelings. I didn't notice the way her energy shifted around Marcus, how her smiles lingered a second too long, or how her laughter grew richer in his presence. If there were stolen glances or subtle touches, they escaped me entirely. I wasn't looking for them. Why would I? Sometimes, when Ethan and Marcus stayed up late talking, Anne would excuse herself to bed, claiming exhaustion. I'd follow soon after, finding her already asleep or reading quietly, her expression serene. We'd lie together in the familiar silence of long marriage, her body warm against mine, and I'd think, this is enough. This is home. There was no hint of the storm brewing beneath the surface, no shadow in her eyes or hesitation in her touch. She kissed me goodnight with the same affection she always had, her fingers brushing my cheek as she whispered, "Sleep well." And I did. In retrospect, I wonder if she resented my trust, if it made her bold, or if she simply believed she could have it all, a husband who loved her, a family she cherished, and a secret she kept so tightly wound that even I couldn't unravel it. If there were nights when the house was quieter than it should have been, I didn't notice. If Anne slipped out of bed, I never stirred. And if Marcus's presence grew too comfortable in our home, I was blind to it. I was blissfully unaware, cradled in the life I thought we'd built together, never imagining how fragile it truly was. That Sunday had been calm, the kind of day where life felt beautifully predictable. Ethan and I decided to run a few errands in town while Marcus stayed back. He claimed he needed to catch up on some reading for a class project, and Anne, ever the gracious host, offered to keep him company. It was a last-minute decision to take my car instead of Ethan's. The weather was pleasant, and the drive gave us time to chat about his studies and plans for the future. But as luck would have it, the car sputtered and died halfway to town. "Great," I muttered, popping the hood and staring uselessly at the engine. Ethan called for a taxi, assuring me it would be quicker than waiting for roadside assistance. The cab dropped us off in front of the house earlier than planned. The driveway was empty, and the house was quiet, just as we'd left it. "Guess Marcus is still working," Ethan said as he reached for the door. We stepped inside, slipping off our shoes to avoid tracking in dirt. I noticed Anne's shoes weren't by the door where she usually left them. Strange, but I didn't think much of it. Then I heard it, muffled noises from upstairs. At first, I thought it was the television. But Ethan froze beside me, his head tilted as he listened. "What's that?" he asked, his voice low. My chest tightened, though I couldn't have said why. We both moved toward the stairs, the creaks beneath our feet drowned out by the sound growing clearer with every step. A rhythmic, intimate cadence. I stopped halfway up, gripping the banister as realization dawned. My heart thundered in my ears. Ethan turned to me, confusion etched on his face, but I couldn't speak. We climbed the rest of the way in silence, the sounds pulling us toward the master bedroom. My hand shook as I reached for the door. The handle turned easily, and I pushed it open. The scene before us shattered the world I thought I knew. Anne and Marcus were tangled in the sheets of the bed and I had shared for years. The intimacy of their position left no room for misinterpretation. They didn't notice us at first, too consumed by their betrayal. It wasn't until Ethan made a noise, a strangled, horrified sound, that they froze. And gasped, scrambling to pull the sheets around her. Marcus stared at us, his face pale, his chest heaving. "Dad." "Mom." Ethan's voice cracked, his eyes darting between the two of them. Anne stammered something incoherent, her hands clutching the fabric to her chest as if it could shield her from the truth now laid bare. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My legs felt like lead, my throat dry and constricted. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Ethan turned to me, his face a mixture of anguish and disbelief. "Dad, what, how could she?" And began to sob, her words spilling out in a rush. "It's not what it looks like. Please, just let me explain." But there was no explanation that could erase what we had seen. Ethan's expression hardened, his pain giving way to fury. He stepped forward, his fists clenched, but I grabbed his arm before he could do anything rash. "Get dressed," I said, my voice cold and unfamiliar to my own ears. "Please," Anne whimpered, tears streaming down her face. "Now." I barked, and both she and Marcus flinched. I turned and walked out, dragging Ethan with me. My son's breaths came in ragged bursts, his body shaking with suppressed emotion. We descended the stairs in silence, leaving the sounds of Anne's sobs and Marcus's hurried movements behind. When we reached the door, Ethan turned to me, his voice trembling with rage. What now, Dad? What the hell do we do now? I looked at him, my chest hollow and aching, but I had no answer. Not yet. The ride back to the city in another cab was silent, save for the hum of the road beneath the tires. Ethan stared out the window, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists on his lap. I wanted to say something, anything, to ease the storm I saw brewing in him, but words failed me. What could I say? How could I explain what neither of us could understand? When we got to my office building, I told the driver to wait and let Ethan inside. The small space was a refuge of order, clean lines, files neatly stacked, everything in its place. It was a sharp contrast to the chaos swirling in my chest. Ethan paced the length of the room, his movements agitated. How could she do this, Dad? With him? Marcus, of all people. His voice cracked, and he dragged a hand through his hair, his composure fracturing. He's my best friend. I trusted him. I brought him into our home. And her, she's my mom. What the hell is wrong with her? His words hit like punches, each one driving deeper into the raw wound in my chest. I wanted to tell him it would be okay, that we would get through this, but the truth was I didn't know if we would. I don't know, Ethan, I said finally, my voice heavy with the weight of what I couldn't say. I don't have answers for you. He stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping as he sank into one of the chairs. His head dropped into his hands, and for the first time, I saw the tears streaking his face. Seeing him like that, broken and vulnerable, shattered something in me. I should have been able to shield him from this. I hate her, he whispered, his voice muffled by his hands. I hate them both. I sat down across from him, leaning forward, trying to meet his gaze. You don't have to figure out how to feel about this right now. Just breathe, okay? We'll deal with this, one step at a time. Ethan looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and glistening with anger and pain. What are you going to do, Dad? About her? The question had been clawing at me since the moment I'd seen them. Divorce was the obvious answer, but it felt like more than a legal decision. It was a tearing apart of everything I thought my life was. The woman I'd loved for nearly half my life wasn't the person I thought she was. The foundation of my family had crumbled beneath me, leaving only rubble. I don't know, I admitted. But I can't stay in that house. Not with her. Not after this. Ethan nodded, his jaw tightening. I can't go back there either. Not while she's there. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of what we'd lost pressing down on us. Later, when I dropped Ethan off at his apartment, I promised him we'd talk more soon, that we'd figure this out together. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, already retreating into the storm inside him. When I finally returned home, the house felt foreign. Anne was sitting on the couch, her face blotchy and streaked with tears. She stood when she saw me, her hands trembling, but I held up a hand to stop her. I'm not here to talk, I said, my voice cold and firm. I'm here to pack. Please, just listen to me, she begged, stepping closer. There's nothing you can say, Anne, I snapped, my control slipping. You've already said everything I need to hear with what you did. She broke down then, sobbing into her hands, but I turned away and headed upstairs. I couldn't afford to feel anything in that moment, not anger, not sadness, not pity. I moved mechanically, packing a bag with the essentials. As I left the house, she followed me to the door, her voice pleading behind me. Liam, I'm sorry. Please don't go. Please don't leave like this. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound of it echoing in the quiet night. In the days that followed, I moved into a modest rental apartment across town. The space was sparse, with bare walls and the faint smell of fresh paint, a blank canvas for a life I hadn't planned to rebuild. I worked long hours to avoid coming home to the silence, throwing myself into tasks that numbed the ache in my chest. And called and texted incessantly, her messages swinging wildly between apologies and pleas for understanding. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Each time her name lit up my phone, it felt like a fresh wound. Ethan, too, withdrew. When I tried to call him, he'd answer briefly, his tone clipped and distant. "I'm fine, Dad," he'd say before cutting the conversation short. I didn't blame him. He'd been betrayed not just as a son but as a friend, and I knew the weight of that was something he'd have to carry on his own terms. Still, the silence between us felt like another casualty of N's choices. The divorce proceedings were swift, a matter of practicality over emotion. I didn't want a long, drawn-out battle. I wanted closure. And didn't contest it, though her eyes brimmed with tears each time we sat across from each other at the mediator's table. She'd beg me to talk, to give her a chance to explain, but I refused. What could she say that would make any of it better? Ethan refused to see her. "She's dead to me," he said when I brought it up. I tried to remind him that she was still his mother, that despite everything, their bond was separate from mine, but he shook his head, his jaw set in that stubborn way he'd inherited from me. "She betrayed you, Dad. She betrayed us both. I don't owe her anything." I let it go, knowing he needed time to process his pain in his own way. And sent letters, pages filled with explanations, apologies, and desperate attempts to salvage something of her relationship with me, with Ethan. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. The memory of what I'd seen in our bedroom spoke louder than any words she could write. One evening, weeks after the divorce was finalized, Ethan came to visit me at the apartment. He looked older somehow, his shoulders heavier, his eyes harder. We sat on the balcony, beers in hand, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. "Do you think it was my fault?" he asked suddenly, his voice raw. "What?" I turned to him, startled. "Marcus," he said, staring into his bottle. "Do you think, if I hadn't brought him into our lives, none of this would have happened?" "No, Ethan," I said firmly. "This isn't on you. Not in any way. But he broke off, his voice cracking. "She was my mom, Dad. She wasn't supposed to do this. Not to you. Not to me." I reached over, gripping his shoulder. "You didn't cause this, Ethan. She made her choices. And Marcus, he wasn't the friend you thought he was. That's on him, not you." He nodded, but I could see the war raging in his mind. It would take time for him to believe those words, to stop carrying the weight of their betrayal as his own burden. As the months passed, the sharp edges of pain began to dull. Ethan and I grew closer, finding comfort in each other's company. We didn't talk much about Anne or Marcus anymore, they were ghosts of a life we no longer lived. And moved out of the house, selling it soon after the divorce was finalized. She sent me one final letter, which I didn't open, and a box of old photos and mementos from our life together. I left it untouched, tucked away in the back of a closet. Some nights, I'd sit alone in the quiet of my apartment, replaying those years in my mind. I thought about the woman I'd married, the life we'd built, and the family I thought we were. I thought about the choices that had led us here and the ways I'd failed to see the cracks before they shattered everything. And yet, as I sat there, I realized something. I wasn't defined by her choices or the wreckage she'd left behind. I was still standing, still breathing, still moving forward. It wasn't the life I'd imagined, but it was mine to rebuild. And that was enough.